Voiceover. It was a rainy afternoon at the shelter. The air felt heavy, broken only by the soft sounds of raindrops against the windows and the occasional bark from the kennels. In the farthest corner of the shelter, Max, a 3-year-old pit bull, lay motionless in his cage. His body, frail and emaciated, told the story of weeks without proper care. His eyes, once bright and full of life, now stared blankly at the cold concrete floor. For Max, hope had become a distant memory. Day after day, visitors walked past his cage without a second glance. His condition was too severe, his spirit too broken. No one wanted to take a chance on him. The shelter staff tried their best, but Max's health was failing. With limited resources and no signs of improvement, the heartbreaking decision to put him to sleep seemed inevitable. Max had no idea what awaited him, but even if he had, he might not have cared. The world had already given up on him, or so it seemed. Voiceover. Max's story began long before he arrived at the shelter. He wasn't always like this, lifeless and broken. Once, Max had a home, but what should have been a life of love and care turned into one of neglect and suffering. His owners left him chained outside for hours, exposed to the scorching sun in summer and the biting cold in winter. They barely fed him, and as the months passed, his body grew weaker, his trust in humans slowly eroded. Eventually, Max was abandoned completely. Left to roam the streets, he scavenged for scraps of food, his ribs pressing visibly against his thin skin. Days turned into weeks, and Max's strength began to fail. He was hungry, sick, and completely alone. When a kind stranger finally found him, Max was lying in a ditch, barely able to lift his head. They brought him to the shelter, hoping it would be a second chance for him. But even there, things didn't get much better. Max's health continued to decline. He was diagnosed with multiple infections, malnutrition, and a weak immune system. Despite their best efforts, the shelter struggled to provide the level of care he needed. Visitors at the shelter would walk past his cage, their eyes lingering for only a moment before moving on. He wasn't the playful, energetic dog most people were looking for. To them, Max looked like a lost cause. The days turned into weeks, and Max grew more tired. The shelter staff, overwhelmed and running out of options, began to have difficult conversations about his future. They didn't want to give up on him, but with limited resources, it was hard to keep hoping for a miracle. Voiceover. Just as all hope seemed lost, something unexpected happened. One quiet afternoon, a young girl named Emily walked into the shelter. She wasn't there to adopt a dog, not at first. She had simply come to visit, to spend time with the animals. But as she made her way through the rows of cages, something caught her attention. Emily stopped in front of Max's cage. Unlike the other dogs who barked or wagged their tails, Max barely moved. His eyes met hers for just a moment before he turned away, his frail body curling up tightly in the corner of the cage. But that moment was enough. Something stirred in Emily's heart, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. Without hesitation, she asked a staff member about him. They told her Max's story, how he had been abandoned, how sick he was, and that he didn't have much time left. They warned her gently, "He's not the kind of dog most people want." Emily didn't say a word. She simply nodded and stepped closer to his cage. As the staff watched from a distance, she knelt down, her hands resting on the cold metal bars. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she began to speak to him. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "I'm here. You're not alone." At first, Max didn't react, but Emily stayed there, her voice steady, her words filled with kindness. Minutes passed, and something remarkable happened. Max slowly turned his head toward her. His dull eyes seemed to hold a flicker of recognition, as if he was trying to understand why this stranger cared. The shelter staff looked on, amazed. In all the weeks Max had been there, no one had ever connected with him like this. But for Emily, it was clear she wasn't going to walk away. Voiceover. What happened next left everyone at the shelter speechless. As Emily knelt beside Max's cage, she didn't just talk to him, she began to sing. Her voice, soft and soothing, filled the quiet room. It wasn't a song anyone recognized, just a simple melody she made up on the spot, words of comfort and hope. "It's okay, Max. You're not alone. You're so much stronger than you know," she sang gently, her voice barely louder than a whisper. At first, Max didn't move. His body remained still, his head resting on the cold floor. But as the melody continued, something extraordinary happened. Max's ears twitched, just slightly. Then, for the first time in weeks, his tail moved, a faint wag, as if he was responding to her. The staff, who had been watching from a distance, froze. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Max, the dog they thought had completely shut down, was reacting. Emily smiled, her voice growing a little stronger. She kept singing, her words flowing naturally, as if she knew exactly what Max needed to hear. Slowly, Max lifted his head. His tired eyes met hers, and there was something different in them now. A glimmer of curiosity, maybe even trust. The moment felt almost magical. Emily reached through the bars, her hand open and still. Max hesitated, then leaned forward ever so slightly, pressing his nose against her fingers. It was the smallest gesture, but for Max, it was a breakthrough. A moment of connection, of hope, in a life that had known only pain. The shelter staff exchanged glances, their eyes wide with amazement. Emily had done what no one else had been able to do. She had reached Max, pulling him back from the edge of despair. But she wasn't finished yet. This was only the beginning. Voiceover. From that moment on, Emily made it her mission to help Max. She came back to the shelter every day, spending hours by his side. She brought a soft blanket to line the cold floor of his cage and sat with him, talking to him, singing the same gentle melodies that first sparked his trust. Day by day, Max began to change. He started lifting his head when she walked in, his tail wagging ever so faintly when he heard her voice. Though his body was still weak, there was a new light in his eyes, a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. Emily wasn't content to simply offer him comfort. She asked the shelter staff what could be done to save him. They explained the challenges. Max needed medication, proper nutrition, and constant care to even have a chance. It would take time, effort, and resources that the shelter simply didn't have. But Emily didn't give up. She talked to her parents, pleading for their help. She set up a fundraising page online, sharing Max's story with her community. She wrote, "This dog deserves a second chance. He just needs someone to believe in him." Donations began to trickle in, small amounts at first, then more as word spread. Local businesses pitched in, and soon Emily had raised enough money to cover Max's medical expenses. The shelter arranged for him to see a vet, and Emily was there every step of the way. The treatments were tough, and there were days when Max struggled, but Emily never wavered. She sat beside him during vet visits, stroking his head and whispering words of encouragement. "You've got this, Max. You're stronger than this." It wasn't just his body that was healing, it was his spirit. Max, the dog who had once given up on life, was slowly beginning to trust again. And it was all because one girl refused to give up on him. Voiceover. With Emily by his side, Max began his journey toward recovery. But it wasn't easy. The treatments were intensive, medications to fight off infections, special diets to help him regain strength, and regular vet visits to monitor his progress. Some days were better than others. On the bad days, Max would barely eat, his body too weak to move, and Emily would sit with him for hours, whispering words of encouragement. "You're going to get through this, Max," she would say, her hand resting gently on his head. "We're not giving up on you." Despite the challenges, Max's progress was undeniable. The once frail, lifeless dog was slowly transforming. His coat, though still patchy, began to show hints of shine. His eyes, once dull and filled with despair, started to sparkle with curiosity and hope. The shelter staff couldn't believe the difference. "We've never seen a turnaround like this," one of them said. "It's like he's a completely different dog." Emily's dedication didn't stop at Max's physical recovery. She worked tirelessly to ensure he felt loved and safe. She spent hours researching how to care for a dog who had been through so much trauma, learning how to rebuild his trust in humans. Max began to respond in ways that melted everyone's hearts. He started wagging his tail when Emily arrived, gently resting his head in her lap, and even attempting to play with a toy she had brought him. Every small victory felt monumental. The first time he ate a full meal, the first time he barked softly in excitement, the first time he managed to walk a few steps outside, it was all evidence of a spirit that was determined to survive. But it wasn't just Max who was changing. Emily's bond with him grew stronger every day, and with every milestone, she felt an even deeper sense of purpose. Max was no longer the dog everyone had given up on. He was a fighter, and Emily was determined to help him win. Voiceover. Over the weeks, Max's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The once frail, hopeless dog had become almost unrecognizable. His coat, now fuller and shinier, reflected the care and love he had received. His body, though still recovering, was stronger than it had been in months. But the most striking change was in his eyes. No longer dull and lifeless, they now shone with trust and joy. Max began to embrace life in ways no one thought possible. He played with toys Emily brought him, wagging his tail enthusiastically as if making up for lost time. Walks that had once seemed impossible were now filled with curiosity and excitement as Max sniffed the air and explored the world around him. Emily couldn't contain her happiness every time he reached a new milestone. "You're amazing, Max," she'd say, hugging him tightly. "Look at you. You're unstoppable." Even the shelter staff marveled at his progress. "I never thought we'd see him like this," one of them admitted, watching Max play. "It's like he's a whole new dog." But for Emily, it wasn't just about his physical recovery. She wanted Max to feel like he belonged, like he was truly loved. She spent hours by his side, teaching him simple commands, rewarding him with treats, and showing him what it meant to be part of a family. Max began to trust more deeply, not just in Emily, but in the people around him. He greeted visitors with a wagging tail and even let the shelter staff pet him, a huge step for a dog who had once feared human touch. Through it all, Emily's love for Max only grew stronger. She saw not just the dog he had become, but the one he always was deep down, resilient, loving, and full of life. Max's story wasn't just a story of survival, it was a story of transformation, proof that with love and care, even the most broken souls can heal. Voiceover. Max's journey had been nothing short of extraordinary, but the most heartwarming part of his story was still to come. After weeks of recovery and countless hours of love and care, Emily made the decision that would change Max's life forever. She and her family finalized the adoption papers, officially welcoming Max into their home. For the first time in his life, Max knew what it felt like to truly belong. Emily prepared everything for him: a cozy bed by the window, a basket full of toys, and a backyard where he could run freely. The first time Max stepped into his new home, he paused, as if trying to take it all in. Then slowly his tail began to wag, and he let out a small, joyful bark. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Welcome home, Max," she whispered, kneeling to hug him. From that day forward, Max thrived in ways no one could have imagined. He became a playful and loyal companion, always by Emily's side. They went on long walks, played fetch in the park, and spent quiet evenings cuddled on the couch. But Max wasn't just Emily's hero. He became an inspiration to everyone who heard his story. People in their community shared how Max's resilience reminded them of the power of second chances, how love and kindness could transform even the most hopeless situations. Emily often looked at Max, now strong, healthy, and full of life, and thought about how close he had been to losing it all, "You've taught me so much," she'd say to him, "about hope, about fighting for what matters." Max's story was more than a rescue. It was a testament to the incredible bond between a dog and the person who refused to give up on him. And in that bond, both Emily and Max found what they had been searching for all along, a forever home filled with love. Voiceover. Max's story touched hearts far and wide, proving that love can change the course of a life. Now healthy, happy, and at peace in his forever home, Max was living proof that second chances work miracles. If you believe in hope, kindness, and second chances, show your support. Like this video, share Max's incredible journey, and spread the word about how rescuing an animal can change lives. And remember, there are thousands of animals in shelters right now who need you. Whether you're looking to adopt, volunteer, or donate, every small action makes a difference. Together, we can save lives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like Max's. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment of hope and transformation. Thank you for being part of this journey. Every share, every like, every kind act brings us closer to a brighter, kinder world.